Hey everyone, and thanks for joining today. Today I have Josh with me, and we are going to be talking about creating a high-performance sales culture. Both Josh and I have read the book No Rules Rules by Hastings. It's a great book talking about company culture from the founder of Netflix. So if you haven't read that book, it's a great read. Josh actually suggested that book, gifted it to me, so it was very nice of him. Thank you, Josh. But it's not specific to sales culture, but both as Josh and I are deep into the sales world, we thought it'd be good just to kind of talk through what that means from a sales perspective, and again, what it means to develop a high-performing sales culture. So Josh, before we get started, do you want to do a quick introduction?
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you. So my name is Josh McDonald. I am a partner at Brainheart Growth. And for anybody that doesn't know, Brainheart Growth is a growth advisory firm primarily focused on lower bid market companies. So essentially what we do in our delivery model is a fractional leadership model. So we work most often, I would say, with sales and revenue teams. But I'm sure as we'll get into a little bit today, growth is no longer just a quota owned by sales. It actually impacts every area of the organization, and definitely talent is a hot topic in this space right now as teams become more intentional about how they grow their business and the types of folks that they attract and retain in their business as well.
So the first question we want to chat about was around hiring.
Yep.
That's kind of the start of the culture process of bringing someone on. So Josh, what are your thoughts on how to align your company values or company culture with the people that you hire?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question to answer, honestly. So hiring salespeople is really hard. I'll start off by saying that hiring anybody is really hard, but something that I think is unique potentially about sales roles in particular is salespeople are the best at selling themselves, right? And in that process, you really don't know that person that well, right? So you couple interviews, maybe an assessment too, you nail them and you're hired, right? And weeks later, months later, it's not that uncommon for a hiring manager to quickly find out, well, this person actually doesn't have a lot of the skills that we originally had thought or deemed important for this role or position. Um, so the first part of that answer is it's really hard. The second part is, and you kind of alluded to this too, is that alignment with core values is really important. So making sure that you're bringing people into your organization that exemplify your core values will save you a lot of the headache down the road. And this isn't unique to just the upfront process of hiring a person. You have to kind of constantly always be evaluating this as people mature in your organization, because at the end of the day, and the book talks about this quite a bit, your culture is actually who you hire, who you fire, and who you promote. At the end of the day, your culture are your people, and aligning them with your core values throughout, whether that's the hiring process, onboarding, and even into their 12, 18 months and beyond, becomes critical on how you evaluate and set yourself up for high performing employees to be a part of your organization.
Yeah, those are all great points, and I can tell you from like my past experience of hiring sales reps too that yes, we've been confused about skills. I shouldn't say confused, but tricked about skill sets
Yeah.
of reps coming on. But to your point, if someone's able to sell themselves, I always kind of take that as a positive. That okay, like
Yeah.
they at least won me over. So if I was my target customer, they won me over. But knowing the cultural side of things is really important. I think that I made the mistake in the past of not knowing what our company culture is or what our desired company culture is in the process, and not having that. I hate being like super formal with like formalizing company culture, but at least knowing like on some level what your company culture is, so that during that conversation, straight up asking the sales rep like, what kind of company you're looking to work for. Don't prompt them. Don't tell them, here's the kind of company we are. Does that sound good to you? But straight up asking them, what are you looking for in a company from a culture standpoint? And just seeing how closely it lines to. That's helped a lot with just trying to find the right candidates that actually are going to be successful. Because, the first month or two, you're not going to see it, but 3, 6, 9 months in, you'll start to kind of see that deviation of culture.
Right. And the interesting part of that is because it takes so long is having a mishire is where it becomes really expensive, right? Because
Yeah.
you don't find out until, unfortunately, that employee probably hasn't reached productivity, and where, they sort of reach that cost parity of where now there's a return on that employee investment. We call it human capital investment, right? Like,
Yeah.
you're making an investment in a person, to help create an ROI on a business, right? And the unique thing about salespeople in particular is they're tied to revenue. They're responsible for driving it and generating it. So, I mean, you almost get this, unfortunately, like double-edged sword where it's the direct cost of attrition in the form of, well, that person's, salary, right? Benefits, all of that. But also the opportunity cost, right? There's a
Yeah.
cost associated with, what if we had made the right hire who was generating opportunities, who was moving deals through the pipeline, sending proposals out. That is a missed opportunity for a business. And in a lot of cases, opportunity costs, especially if you're in the lower mid market, are the greatest cost to doing business sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think for a small business, the amount of money that's lost on hiring the wrong salespeople is just
Of course.
astronomical. I've lost years of business growth before where an entire year was wiped out, where I hired someone. It took me 6 months to figure out they weren't the right fit. Another 3 to 6 months, let them go. And then I'm starting from scratch again the year afterwards. We're like, that's an entire year's worth of potential projects that got lost or deals that didn't come in, which would have meant, better product development on the other side of things, all because of just a bad hire. So
Yeah.
that's a mistake that you learn a couple times. Usually it's not a perfect one-time mistake, but then once you learn it, you realize, okay, I can't make this mistake anymore.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's exactly right. And I'll turn this to you actually. I'd be curious to know, being a small business owner, like how do you guys think about solving that problem, right? Whenever you experience sort of this revolving door of sales rep turnover, like, what are the things that you guys put into practice to try to, I guess, prohibit that from happening again in the future?
Yeah, I mean, it's cliche as hell to say, but like not making the mistake more than once is kind of a big part of hiring. Is like, once you've kind of saw a red flag but ignored it and hired someone anyways, just making
Yeah.
sure that the future times you do hiring, you're not ignoring that red flag anymore because it actually means something too. But then, once someone's hired, which we could dive into a lot deeper too, but once someone's hired, then it's like, do I have a proven sales process, onboarding process that makes them successful, so that that once we get that right person, we're not dropping the ball on onboarding them correctly, which means that we're going to lose opportunity costs or potentially lose them as a sales rep because they're not able to get the success they want right away too. So that's kind of that was probably the bigger part of it. And in developing an onboarding process and an overall sales strategy, I think that helps you better personify what kind of sales rep you want to hire. Like, who
Right.
can I hire that can run this onboarding process with or the sales process with? And then when you're in those sales discussions, when you're hiring, then it's much easier to align the candidate to the proven system that you've implemented too. So
Right.
those are probably the biggest things I'd say, like learning over the years when it comes to hiring good salespeople.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And two, like, you pattern recognition becomes so important whenever you're hiring. Recognizing the same patterns in the people that you want to replicate, right? So kind of going back to, I think, how did the people that are my A players now perform throughout their interview process? What were the things that stood out? Were there any red flags with that? And sort of having good documentation, I think, and acknowledgement of what is important when you craft sort of that ideal hiring profile. I think a very common mistake you see is people not really having a tight ideal
Yeah.
hiring profile, right? And so they don't know exactly what they're looking for, and there isn't a systematic sort of approach. Think of it as a hiring matrix of the combination of hard skills and soft skills that are going to be important for the particular role that you're hiring. Because if you're hiring an account executive versus like an account manager, for example, that profile, that person is really different when it comes to hunting and farming, and just even that combination of hard skills and soft skills is, especially on the soft skills side, is
Yeah.
particularly different. And unfortunately, a lot of organizations and companies that are hiring reps, I think, struggle with that. And sort of having a catch-all for here's what a salesperson is. They're, a good talker. They're good at persuading, those types of things. Positive note, though, I do think, companies are acknowledging that that's not what really good salespeople are, and that's actually kind of the opposite in a lot of ways of what are leading indicators of folks that are going to be successful at generating revenue for the organization, because it's a really hard job and it takes a really special person that gets excited about that.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's funny because my father, who ran sales teams and ran a business for many years, when he was hiring sales reps, he wanted like good, bubbly, outgoing people is always
Yeah.
what he wanted, like good talkers, like you're saying.
Yeah.
And they sold more commoditized products. It was printing stuff, so it was a little bit more of that kind of, I guess, commoditized sales process. Where like my best sales reps were always listeners. They weren't the most bubbly people in the room, because like they were the ones that when they met with clients were able to listen, pull good insights out of them, and then propose good solutions and understand the ROI, what they're doing. Where if they were that bubbly talker that did good during the interview, they would never really be able to custom tailor a good solution to prospects because they were talking to them the entire time. So it's funny to say that, because there is that kind of that old school mentality of like salespeople are good talkers.
Yeah. And I think something too that I'm taking a closer look at whenever I'm hiring too is business acumen in particular, kind of across the board, not just unique to salespeople, because it's really hard to find people who are comfortable with and have the skills to be able to hold high level conversations with executives at like that business level. It's very easy to have conversations that are technically focused, for example, right? If you're selling a very technical product or service, people tend to lean on that too much, in my experience. And this is how you essentially become commoditized in a
Yeah.
lot of ways, is because for the most part, a technical product and service, there are a lot of companies out there that can probably provide a similar solution to you. But the job as a good salesperson and the job as a good revenue generator is to be able to draw the connection between the service or product delivery aspect to what are the desired business outcomes, right? So being able to speak to, how is this impacting your P&L, right? Why is this an important strategic decision that the executive leadership team is making, right? Feeling comfortable at playing at that level is where you really start to understand as a salesperson how you can differentiate and position yourself against other competitors essentially in your space that you're selling into.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. Which I guess kind of leads into our next topic, which is on compensation. When it comes to hiring a good rep who's got the culture and the skills and what you're looking for, there's a whole bunch of different philosophies when it comes to compensation for sales reps. And again, they talked a lot about it in the book, No Rules Rules, about how they tend to pay top of market, and they expect their employees to perform top of market. I've known many sales organizations who pay lower end of things and have this giant variable comp component, saying like, I want my sales reps to always be hungry and whatnot. So,
Yeah.
what's your take on compensation? Where do you advise your clients meet when it comes to, middle of market, bottom of market, top of market, for paying their sales team?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. And it's actually one of the topics of the book where I guess I'm most conflicted when it comes to sales roles, because there is this legacy component around sales compensation, right? Around like there's a base component and then there's a variable component, right? And how do you avoid paying this big base salary and still incentivize somebody to be out there to be closing business, whether you're net new or whether you're on the existing customer side of things. I think it would be a really interesting experiment actually to see what it would look like if you just took the approach to paying your most talented salespeople a total compensation package, as an example. So no variable component. If their base salary is 100 and their variable component's 100, what would performance look like for a high performing sales rep on your team if you just paid them the 200 total compensation package as a salary? It'd be really interesting. Nobody does that. I don't know of a company that really has done that. And the reason I say this is I think about myself too. Like, I personally am going to give it like my best effort and work the hardest regardless of how it's structured, because I think that's just something that is inherent in top performing people across the board, even if it's sales people, right? Like, you change the structure a little bit. Is there a motivation component to it? Yeah, but I think the motivation can wane very quickly as you actually start to get into like the nitty gritty trenches of doing the job, and you're not thinking about that all the time. You're just thinking about doing the work and um, moving in a positive direction towards your goals. So the way that the way that I advise on this is we have to take a look at the position first and foremost, and understand what top of market rate means, right? And you have to put that in context of the business too. So if this is a relatively young business, they're going to have to figure out how to upskill a less skilled team, because talent is going to follow where the bigger paychecks are coming from. And usually if you're a lower market company, let's say, for example, you're between $1 and $5 million a year, you likely cannot have a payroll where everybody's getting paid top of market. It's untenable. Now you can move towards that direction, and you should over time for sure. But usually to start, the way that we advise that is to start looking at what current market rates are for the different positions, and then we adapt and craft the compensation plan around that. And we always try to make it very simple from a variable comp standpoint. It's one of the most frustrating things, I think, for an individual contributor, when it comes to like how are commissions paid out. You should know where you stand at any time when it comes to your compensation. So a big component to that too is making sure that comp plans are well understood, they're simple, there's no ambiguity or gray areas, so that reps, or even if it's on the marketing side of things as well, understand exactly where they are from a comp standpoint at all times.
Yeah. Yeah. The number of comp plans I've seen that have been total disasters where it's 20 pages and this spreadsheet, and that spreadsheet, and that kind of
Yeah.
thing. Like, it doesn't help the rep be successful. And my take has always been when developing comp plans for reps that I want to pay them higher end of the market for our industry and our company size. But like you said, if you're a $1 to $2 million or $5 million business, you don't want to exceed, anywhere between 15-20% of your total revenue going towards the sales team, probably in general. It depends on what you're selling and what
Yeah.
your structure is and stuff too. But like, you probably have some sort of threshold you don't want to exceed as total sales comp going towards your team. But the base for me has always been, what do they bring to the table beyond just sales? Like, or
Yeah.
what expertise do they bring? So if someone has great product knowledge or great business knowledge and they're coming to your team, that's going to be a differentiating factor that allows them to have a higher base, because they're going to bring more than just like transactional sales.
Yep.
But then beyond that too, I always, I go back to what you're saying, and was mentioned in the book too, that the best people are going to work hard no matter what. And you can work your ass off on a deal and have it, you lose the deal for whatever other reason, or you just can't fulfill the deal because something happened operationally. And like, should the sales rep be punished for that? And vice versa, you can have deals that are incredibly easy to just drop in your plate and you close them and you win them too. So I've noticed that too, that like, it's fun to look at calculators and like, oh man, what would my commission be if I landed this deal? At the end of the day, like your daily motivation, your daily discipline has nothing to do with that at all. It's 100% to do with like, what's my total comp? Am I being fairly compensated for my industry? Or can I go to some more company that'll pay me more money for doing the exact same work, using my knowledge the exact same way? And I've seen a number of companies that have had sales reps. They hire them when they're newer, greener to the industry or middle of the industry. They train them up, they start closing great deals, and all of a sudden their competitors get wind of this great salesperson. They get hired away for, I don't know, 30-40% more base.
Yeah.
The company would be happy to pay if they actually thought about it and had time to negotiate it. But instead that was their strategy. Is like, we don't want our bases to be too high because it'll demotivate our salespeople. It's like that's not how that works. Like, you want to hire for great talent. And again, within the confines of what your total revenue is for your business and how much you want to pay out to. But I especially like your point though about keeping it simple. Like, I always had all of our comp plans be very straightforward. Where like there was a base component, there was a fixed percent when you landed a deal, and then a fixed percent as that deal paid out. So it was kind of like a very clear cut and dry. There's not weird little like tiers and bonuses and comps that go into it,
Yeah.
which can help obviously. But I've talked to so many sales reps that will sandbag deals because they want to hit their quarterly bonus next quarter, but they know they can't hit this quarter, which just totally misaligns the company's goals with what that sales rep's goals are from a compensation standpoint. So I'm kind of with you on that one. Like, the more you can keep it simple, the better in the process.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And something actually incredibly important that I didn't mention is, and this is really where it all starts when it comes to compensation, is you need to take a look at your forecast and your model, right? So you need to look at how you're forecasting revenue for probably the next 12 to 24 months and even beyond, because how you set up that variable component is inherently tied to your revenue goals that you have for the business. It's also going to inform what type of skill level that you need on your team. So every forecast, every revenue model, right, has assumptions baked into that. And you should always be pressure testing those assumptions. One of the hardest things, because it's difficult to pull data on this, is actually around the people assumptions that go into a forecast model, right? Like, okay, I'm forecasting X amount of growth, month over month, year over year, but what does that translate to in the actual skill level that I have to have on my team for that to even be possible? That's something that you have to take a look at and evaluate too whenever you're considering bringing on new people to the team, because it dictates and will play out in your actual forecast and revenue as you start to go and put in your actuals into that, and money starting to come into the door. Is if there's misalignment between that, it's often a people challenge, because your assumptions and what you put into the model from a skill standpoint that's required to achieve those revenue goals, there could be gaps there potentially.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you're obviously in the professional services world too. And if you're telling a sales rep that they're going to hit X quota and so they're going to get it, do you, like, from a people standpoint, do you have enough people to actually fulfill those orders? Because like,
Yeah.
you might need to hire new staff just to help do the billable services to even allow them to hit those numbers. And then, yeah, from a sales side of things, that was one thing, again, working with previous teams too. We wanted to hit a revenue goal of X million in 2019. Okay, so if we hire a new sales rep, so we need to hire a new sales rep to get there, or hire a new inside sales rep to get there. How long does that sales rep take to get up to speed, to get productive enough to actually do that? It's like, well, okay, now we're looking at 18 months out to realistically be firing all cylinders to hit those numbers we need to hit too. So that's a major component that, yeah, I think is often underlooked when you're just looking at spreadsheets too.
Yeah, for sure. And you have to consider a lot of factors, right? Like your average deal size, your time to close, who this rep is calling on, what are their personas, like is there buyer seller mismatch in terms of what they've called on in the past, right? Are they going from selling to like managers and individual contributors to now selling to executives? And this is why it's complicated, is all of these things play into uh, hiring the right people for your team and ensuring that you have the right skills on the team to be able to ultimately achieve whatever your growth goals are.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Which I think kind of ties well into our last topic here. which is managing performance. So, when it comes to actually having people on your team and staying consistent to actually hit the goals that you forecasted, there's the big world of sales management, which there's tons of different philosophies on. And this is even outside of like talking about strategy, which again, I know your team does regarding kind of building strategy for teams.
Yep.
But strictly speaking, from a sales management standpoint, giving feedback to reps, what that cycle looks like, how you treat them, are they a family or are we something different? So I guess kind of start with the open question here of like, how do you think good feedback should be given in the sales environment or on a sales team? What does that feedback cadence look like, and what conversations are being had?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I guess the first place that I would start with that is I'm a big believer in just honest and direct feedback, right? Like there should be no ambiguity or confusion between a manager and a rep, and vice versa, a rep and a manager who should be also providing feedback to their manager as well. So it's as much top down as it is bottom up, because at the end of the day, it's a team sport. Like we win and lose as a team. Like, yes, individuals carry a quota, and yes, they're ultimately responsible for making sure that deals close in a timely, a timely manner, and the quantity and all of that. But it falls on the shoulder of the manager to guide them, right, and give them the direction and feedback that they need to be successful. So direct and honest, open feedback often is usually required to do that. Where you get yourself into trouble, I think, is whenever you're not giving direct feedback. You give feedback that could be, confusing, right, to the rep, or maybe even is sort of sugarcoating it in some ways. I think that's probably the most common, like not wanting to have that difficult conversation. You really have to have managers that are okay and comfortable with having conversations that sometimes kind of suck and sometimes kind of are uncomfortable. But that's why it's important to lead with context. It's important to always set the context of why you're providing the feedback. And there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. Something we do internally, actually at Brain Heart Growth, even within our team, but also whenever we're working with clients, is we always try to be disarming in the way that we provide feedback. And the way that I like to do that is essentially something to the effect of, hey, I'm going to provide you with some feedback that has positive intent. What I'm about to tell you is really only meant to help you be better at your job and to help you be successful. And at first, it might sound a little bit critical, but please only take this with positive intent, right? Like bring the walls down a little bit so that there is no question that the feedback that I'm about to receive is going to be direct, but also it's meant to make me better, which you want people in your organization that are growth minded and they want to be better, right? And 10 out of 10 times people say, that sounds good, I'm ready, I can take the feedback. And 10 out of 10 times people usually take it pretty well. And I also like to say, hey, what feedback can you provide to me as your manager to help you to do your job better as well? And I want you to be direct and don't be afraid to be critical. I think that transaction is, you have to instill some confidence in people that are reporting up to you to have those conversations. But once you get to that level of candor and directness is where you really start to get into a groove and a rhythm, because there's no question, where you stand in that relationship. And at the end of the day, you're just trying to create a performance culture where you work together as a team to achieve, the ultimate strategy and mission and vision of the organization.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I agree with you 100% on just being direct. And well, it's not the same thing. I did, used to manage a kitchen at Culver's restaurants, make a lot of butter burgers back in the day.
Nice.
I got a good analogy going here, but when it came to like this, the feedback side of things was that, if you're in the kitchen, you're managing a kitchen, and someone's falling behind on whatever position, the grill, they're running their fryers, they're not like meeting the standards of orders coming out and they're missing things. There was so many managers who would like just kind of shyly say like, "Hey, can you speed up a little bit? What's going?" Or they wouldn't say anything because they wouldn't want to make someone mad, right? Like,
Yeah.
someone's already struggling making burgers. Like, why would I tell them to move faster or do something about it? I'm just gonna let them kind of struggle through it. And we'll see what happens. There's so many sales reps or sales managers that do that, where they'll have a rep that's struggling until it breaks, and it's like they have misquoted drastically. They're on a performance improvement plan. They're about to get fired because you were too afraid to be direct with them months ago when you're supposed to be, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Versus, like, again, going back to the kitchen analogy, if someone's struggling, get them help right away, pop in, ask them what's wrong, ask them if you can grab something for them, do something for them, let them know, hey, you're missing the mark. We're waiting on you for something here. You're obviously not meet expectations. And sometimes things or circumstances that cause that to happen. Other times that person's performance is lacking for some reason. And your job should be that coach that steps in and gives them direct feedback and goes through that process too. And that's like with my reps, I've always had minimum like weekly check-ins with them.
Yeah.
Having them enter in their information into a spreadsheet that aligns with the forecasts, not just for revenue, but activities and deals being proposed, and kind of working our way up the funnel so that we could spot issues much earlier on in the process before it became end of quarter or halfway through the year and we're not even close to hitting numbers. Because again, that's not going to help anybody in that process. But again, I really like what you just say just about having the intention of trying to help people. And you shouldn't have to let them know that, but like setting the stage, I think really helps with that process too, especially let them know like we're here as a team, we're going to help each other. And again, as a sales manager or a business owner, whoever you are in those shoes, or as a fellow sales rep, like you're all on the same team. If your company does well, then you're all going to do well. So you want that person to succeed too. So yeah, I think it's just interesting how many sales managers are afraid to have that more direct conversation. And I don't know if it's like a reflection on them so they feel bad about it, or if they're just literally afraid to be more direct because they don't want to be the bearer of bad news for the rep or what it is. But
yeah. So my experience with that actually is it's actually a cultural thing, I think, in a lot of ways. Like we're sort of taught not to rock the boat, right? Or this idea of like Midwest nice for us, that's a real thing. It really is. And you go and so when I work with like a Midwestern company and then I go work with an East Coast company, I mean, you can imagine the differences in the way that people interact and talk with one another. Like East Coast, the culture on the East Coast is much more direct in nature. And in fact, sometimes I've gone into meetings, with executive teams for a company that operates on the East Coast, and I'm like, oh my God, do these people like hate each other? The way that they're talking to each other is crazy. And then in the Midwest, right, what you see culturally too is this Midwestern nice, where it's like almost kind of weaving around and sugarcoating the thing that you kind of want to say. And that is what creates, I think, assumptions, right? You start to assume things based on the types of conversations that you have when you're not being direct. And there are ways to be direct and not be a jerk, right? Like, and I think that's the difference is you have to set the context that the reason that we're direct is to remove ambiguity out of any of these conversations so that we all know exactly where we stand at any given time. And the other component too that I wanted to mention that you kind of brought up is so like the leader's job, right, in recognizing maybe where reps are struggling or our teammates are struggling and intervening is obviously important. Like that is a primary duty of any good leader and any good manager is to step in and help when they can. The other component that I like to do and I think is really helpful is also setting kind of the precedent or like the stage that nobody is responsible for your success on this team except for you. And that kind of has to be acknowledged across the board, right? Like if you're a rep and you're struggling, ask for help. Like don't wait for your manager to find out because your pipeline's dry or because a deal didn't close that you committed to or these types of things, right? Like be very proactive in seeking feedback, because in my experience, the best sales folks and the best revenue folks not only take feedback really well, they actually seek it. They actually are proactive in going out and in looking for criticism that has positive intent.
Yeah, no, of all the professions outside of being the business owner yourself, I think sales reps really need to have that big ownership mindset
Yeah.
when it comes to their job. And over the years, when it comes to our company's ability to grow and do new things, it really is often our top sales reps that come to us and say, we should really be doing this. Why aren't we doing this? The best sales reps like really get on the back of the owner of the business or of the operations team, hopefully in a good way. Hopefully they have like
Yeah.
good candor where they can push things in the right way. But from my experience, it's always been the top sales reps are the ones that are pushing things forward, because they realize that if they're going to take ownership in their career, what they're doing, they're going to keep pushing for what they need to do in the process. And as you said, like if you're struggling, then you should be talking about it and not waiting until something happens. Because again, on the lower tier of sales rep performance, how many sales reps do we know that have every reason, every excuse in the world why they didn't hit quota outside of them not having their activities, or
Right.
them not correctly aligning their sales messaging with what's going to resonate in the market. And there are cases, if a sales rep's listening to this and they are not successful through the business, their business is not supporting them, then take ownership and find a different job. Like there's cases where like
Yeah.
you be successful any business because, or sorry, at that business in general, because that business might be going through a struggle with product alignment fit or product market fit, and you can't be successful there. So if you've already had those discussions with the operations team and the ownership team and your sales management around like, I need help, and they're not able to help you, then help yourself and get a different job at that point too. But never just accept not being a good performer or not, meeting the mark you want to meet from an income standpoint or from a strategy or, growth perspective. So no one's going to save you in the world of sales.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love the quote. Yeah, nobody's coming to save you, and I mean, it's true. And yeah, you have to have a high degree of ownership and accountability at the end of the day. If you just have those two things, you will be pretty successful, I think, in revenue generation, because you'll figure out how to navigate your current situation and get the help when you need it, or help yourself too. To your point, whenever maybe you're not getting the support that's required to kind of get you to the next stage that you want to be at.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is probably a good time to wrap it up then. We've had a lot of good talk about hiring, compensation, and managing feedback. Before we go, is there anywhere people should go to find you and learn more about you, Josh?
Yeah, sure. I'm definitely pretty active on LinkedIn, so you can go to my profile there. Also, brainheartgrowth.com is our website. We're going through a complete rebuild right now, which is exciting, so you can check us out there too.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining today.
Yeah, thanks, James.